In this video we're going to learn about a number of different useful tools within the Arduino. We're going to learn about pulse width modulation using arrays and also the for loop. The code is quite simple. It's to flash one LED or flicker it so it looks like a gas light, and it will be triggered by a button. We're going to start by setting up two constant int variables. Button 1 equals 4, and the other is constant int LED pin equals 10. We then set up the array in the form of a byte called flicker, and in this case it has 13 values. These values represent different brightnesses of the LED during the code. This will vary from 0 to 255. We have one more variable to set up, which is an int, which is flicker, which equals 0. This is used to initially set the switch to 0 during startup. We then go into the void setup, and we have two things we need to set up here, which is pin mode LED pin as an output and pin mode button 1 as an input using the internal pull-up resistor. This holds that pin, in this case pin 4, high, so at 5 volts, and when it gets red, if it's grounded, it will read 0. If it isn't grounded, it will read 5 volts. We then set up two functions, void flicker on and void flicker off. These will get called in the main loop, depending on what the state of the push button is in. Void flicker on, when it's called, starts a for loop. And in this case it starts off at 0 and it will loop through and pick out the first part of the array, and depending on the number that set as flicker will analog write to the LED pin. Once it's done that one loop, it then goes again, increases it by 1, so it picks the next number in the array until it has gone through all 13 values within the initial array set up. Once it completes the 13th cycle, it returns back to the void loop. Void flicker off only has one real task. When this gets called, it basically will analog write the LED pin to 0, which basically turns that LED off. Once it's done that, it will very quickly return back to the void loop. The void loop has got basically 3 tasks that it needs to do, which it will continually keep doing. Its first task is to read and set a variable called flicker, and it will digitally read button 1, i.e. has the button on pin 4 been pressed and grounded or not. Depending on what it reads at the time, it will either set it at 0 or 1. The next task the void loop has to do is if flicker equals 0, it can then move to the next stage, which is set flicker on function. The void loop has 3 tasks it has to carry out. The first is it will set a variable called flicker, and this will equal the digital read of button 1. So depending on the state of the button, is it high or low, 0 or 1. The next thing it does, if flicker equals 0, go to function flicker on. If flicker is not 0, it will then move to the else statement, which is flicker off, in which case it'll go off and do whatever flicker off function requires it to do. And after it completes the if or else, it will return from them functions back to the start of the loop again, reading the digital state of the pen.